Become a Body Kindness Insider. Visit bodykindnessbook.com and click on Get Started. Because real health is about being good to yourself, it's time for Body Kindness, the place where all bodies fit and weight is just a number. Hi, I'm Rebecca Scritchfield, author of the book Body Kindness, registered dietitian, nutritionist, and host of this podcast. My topic today is healthy eating for families. And, this topic is really important to body kindness for many reasons, but a big one for me is that in this day and age, a lot of times healthy can really mean like perfect eating or never have a cupcake. And I've seen it with my clients. I've seen it in a lot of the articles and books that are out there, recommending, everything, eliminate sugar. And I just don't think that sets up a healthy long-term relationship with food for families. And I think my guest today agrees. So I'm very excited to dive into this topic and really just kind of wrap our heads around, our opinions of what healthy eating for families mean. And I have a really wonderful expert on who knows her stuff, not only as a mom, but also as a registered dietitian and nutritionist. So my special guest to discuss our topic today is Sally Kuzemchak. Sally is a registered dietitian, educator, author, and mom. She blogs at realmomnutrition.com, a no judgments zone all about feeding families, and blogs weekly for Parents Magazine. In 2014, she collaborated with Cooking Light on the Dinnertime Survival Guide, a cookbook for busy families, and she recently released an ebook called the Snacktivist Handbook, How to Change the Junk Food Snack Culture at School, in Sports, and at Camp, and Raise Healthier Snackers at Home. An award-winning reporter and writer, Sally has been published in nearly 20 magazines, including Prevention, Health, Family Circle, Eating Well, Fitness, and Shape. And she serves as a contributing editor to Parents Magazine for 6 years. Well, thank you so much, Sally, for being on the show, and welcome. To get started, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm so happy to be here. So you said a lot in my little intro there, but I am a registered dietitian. I have 2 boys, ages 8 and 12, and they are obsessed with Star Wars. And I have a blog, Real Mom Nutrition, that I call a no judgments zone. And I've been blogging there since about 2009. And I started my blog as a way to, I call it sort of pull back the curtain and show people that feeding kids is not as easy as it is sometimes made out to be. And that even when you have a bunch of initials after your name, it doesn't mean that you eat quote unquote perfectly or that your children do too. And so I really just wanted to share my successes, but also my failures and the ups and downs of feeding kids and feeding yourself when you're a mom and you're busy and time crunched. And I just wanted it to be sort of a safe space for people to come and learn and share their own successes, but also sort of laugh and learn from the failures as well.
Yeah, no, I love that because, like, for example, a lot of time, you'll hear the word like real food, right? Like just a kind of another label for like perfect, clean, whatever, like not necessarily a good thing. But when your blog name is about like being real, like I'm not going to put on this show that everything's perfect. I'm going to share kind of the good, bad, and ugly of what it's like for me as a mom. And I just find you're writing it's like comforting. It's like, a cup of hot chocolate, like very pleasant. It's fun to read and pleasant and delicious.
I love that.
So yeah, I definitely recommend listeners to check it out, and all your resources I will include in the show notes. But let's just kind of dive into this conversation, just starting with your philosophy when it comes to feeding kids. So what do you do?
So I do believe that a diet of mostly fresh, unprocessed foods is the best way to go. But I also believe in being realistic. And as my blog name tells, Real Mom Nutrition, I do believe in living in the reality, which is allowing children to have access to the foods that are available and to let them experience it. So I don't shield my kids from things like, like you were saying, cupcakes at a birthday party, or, punch with red dye at an event or something like that. Those aren't the things I may keep in my home. I try to keep our home full of mostly those fresh foods, but I recognize that, there are lots of different foods in the world, and I want my kids to experience, the good and the bad, whatever they choose to experience. And so I try to teach them about balance without restricting them. So I really do feel like there's a lot of emphasis on this quote unquote clean eating that restricts a lot of those foods. And I do see parents restricting them with their kids. And I don't think that that's a good idea. And so I want my kids to experience that. And I've written on my blog about, the fact that my kids like junk food. I wrote a post called "My Kids Like Junk Food, then that's okay." And I got a lot of flack from even some dietitians about that. But what my message was, of course, these foods taste good to kids because, they're engineered to taste good. Mm-hmm. And we shouldn't shame our kids for thinking they taste good, or shame ourselves as parents like we failed because our kids like Doritos. Of course they like Doritos, like they taste so good. But, that doesn't mean we keep Doritos in the house or, we eat them all the time. But so I really try to kind of keep that balance and that eye on reality of, here's this way that I want our meals to be mostly fresh, unprocessed food, but these other foods can play a part in their lives too.
Yeah, no, there's so many things I want to respond there. And I just have to tell this story. I cannot get out of my head right now about because I think we both agree that you can go extremely in the wrong direction. And so I was once doing an interview for a local station. I totally forget what the topic was. I think it was like juice fast not being good for you or something like that. And when we were finishing up, she was telling me a story about how her son plays pretty competitive baseball. And so we're in DC. It's, springtime, summertime, hot, humid weather. And I guess, at this particular practice or game, they had like their water, their hydration, right? So for during the sport, they had water and they were passing out some sports drink, probably Gatorade or something. And I guess one of the moms jumped out of the stadium, ran down the field to the dugout, was like, "No, don't drink that poison." And she threw this mason jar of kombucha tea at him.
Oh, God. And
he was mortified, so I was always laughing at that because it's first of all, I love fermented foods. I love kefir. I make kefir pops with my kids. And if someone likes kombucha, all the power to you. I personally do not like it. I don't like the idea of it. And just this idea that, and I'm sure we'll get into, because I know it's in your Snacktivist about kids can overconsume sports drinks, especially at rest and stuff. But this was clearly a situation where there was sweat loss, hot weather, probably, it's not a big deal if an athlete is reaching for it to prevent cramping. Mm-hmm. And this mom is running, calling it poison and throwing kombucha at him, embarrassing him around his friends. And I think that's would be hilarious. My definition of extreme.
Yes. That poor child.
Exactly. But yeah, so some other things that you said that resonated with me is the idea of balance without restricting them. And, I agree with you 100%. Anything my kids like, we've introduced to them, and they definitely love chocolate. They love chocolate chips with waffles and pancakes. I'm sure, without any structure in the house, they'd reach for chocolate all the time until they get a bellyache. And my hope is they would probably, reach for something else. But also at their ages, right? So they're 2.5 and 4.5. And just like you were saying with the Doritos, they do taste good. We get a chemical reward for consuming it. And so it's natural that they're associating pleasure, with something about food, and that's something that you want to encourage. But as a parent, trusting what a good idea of balance looks like to you. And what I find very interesting in this day and age is that, so if you're in a family that is afraid of like any amount of sugar, doesn't really have a sense of confidence with balance, then that could be a form of restriction that could lead your kid to actually overeating it. And then if you're someone that's a family that's trying to, you grew up as a dieter, or you're trying to kind of free yourself from dieting, it's like this structure that I would call body kindness is probably similar to yours, like how you're talking about balance, mostly, fresh and wholesome, most of the time, that kind of thing, but still having a livable life. I mean, to some people that can feel like a diet too, or too rigid. So, I mean, really families do have to kind of figure out, I think, what works for you. But I think if you're in the extreme of sort of that super clean, you're not teaching your kids any skills for how to self-regulate around just normal living. And then if you're also kind of, well, we're in a non-diet house, woo, so kids really do need a structure. I mean, even from the sense of that their brains aren't yet that developed to make rational decisions. So they really do need parents to be the parent. And I think it's just that setting up a difference between structure and rules.
Yeah, I think when you mentioned about, chocolate chips and pancakes, like absolutely, my boys would put chocolate chips in everything, if they could. And so I try to give them these like kind of subtle messages along the way that I hope will, follow them through life. So when we're choosing something, I might say, you know what, we had those chocolate chip pancakes for breakfast. So let's kind of, ease up on the sugar for snack time or whatever it is, without being like, we had this, so we can't have this. I try to just make it like, you know what, we just went to a birthday party. So let's pass on dessert tonight. We'll have some tomorrow. And I hope that they'll just kind of keep those messages in their head as they get older and go out into the world on their own and think about, because as a dietitian, of course, I kind of think about my whole day. Like, I think it's just sort of second nature, probably you too, like, gosh, did I have any fruit today? Like, did I have any whole grains today? And I think about, where the gaps are and, when I'm choosing a snack or choosing a meal. And I hope that I can equip my kids with that without it feeling like restriction.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because to hear your tone of voice, it reminds me of a lot of my inner voice and what I bring about in body kindness, which is finding your inner caregiver. And I think that that's a huge difference. So if there's a body kindness listener that feels like their inner critic is really ruling the roost, right? Judging everything you do. Nothing's ever good enough. Perfectionistic voice is still kind of guiding you. That is probably where you're going to be in a territory of struggling. So where part of you wants to just have like, full food freedom and do whatever you want, but that lack of structure can mean that you miss nutrients, and, kind of set patterns where, that aren't really kind of good to help, your whole family meet their nutrition needs. And it's not that every day has to be perfect, but I think the idea of like, if you're playing a game of darts and you're aiming for the bullseye but you're happy when you score points on the board. And I do love that idea of, the way you described it to me sounds like this gentle scan, this curiosity of, okay, what might I be missing? And maybe can I balance out getting that with also something that's delicious and enjoyable? And that type of a caregiver voice is going to create a lot less anxiety, I think, around the food. And to me, that's where truly healthy eating comes from, right? So where it's not about fear or anxiety, it's more about curiosity and like interest in, the intuitive eating principle would be honoring your health with gentle nutrition. And I think that is where more parents should strive to go.
I like that idea of a gentle caregiver voice. I really like that. I do want to mention too that something I did recently, and I wrote about this on my blog, I let my kids have free reign to a plate of cookies. And this came from, I'm sure you're familiar with Ellen Satter and her division of responsibility. And she suggests occasionally giving children unlimited access to, what she calls forbidden foods, those foods like sweets and treats that we think of as forbidden or that we really want to limit. And with the idea that children should be able to self-regulate. And I was always too afraid to do that, honestly, with my kids, I'll be honest. And finally, I got up the nerve to do it. I think it was around the holidays. We had a plate of holiday cookies, and I put them out, and my kids ate like two. I put out like a plate of cookies and like a plate of apples and cheese and something like that. Mm-hmm. And they each had like about two cookies and had some cheese and fruit, and then they went outside and played. And I was like, my jaw was on the floor because I really expected them to eat that whole plate of cookies. And I was really pleasantly surprised that they just sort of, ate a pretty reasonable amount. Plus they ate the other things, and then they were like, all right, I'm full. I'm going outside to play. Mm-hmm. And I've done it a couple times since then, and with the same results. And so it's, I feel like, unfortunately, I'm not sure I have that amount of self-regulation, thanks to just years of, not being especially, body kind to myself. Mm-hmm. But I was really impressed with that.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with Ellen Satter's work, and it's amazing. It's what I follow and recommend. I actually think that is an example that your approach with this caregiving and this sort of balance, but without restrictive, that it is actually working, because I've seen it in counseling. At one point I had everyone in this family of four in my office as individuals and as family members, all for different reasons. But so the older brother was an athlete. The mom had weight concerns and, kind of dieting and undereating, overeating concerns. And the dad had similar habits, but just wasn't impacting his weight. So his body was keeping a set point, but he was still concerned with his behaviors. And then I eventually got the youngest one, the girl. And at the end of the day, there was, they were concerned about her eating patterns, because I guess she had 3 cupcakes at her brother's soccer match. And when I asked her, she's like, well, we just never get any sweets at all. Mm. And the only sweet that she could remember having in the house was a really crappy, diet, like granola bar, nothing that would really satisfy a kid. And I think that is exactly why division of responsibility is a much better approach, even if you're scared. Like you were scared, but you did it anyway. And it turned out how we would expect normal eaters to respond, but in the case of my client, it was the restriction and the deprivation that led to this compulsive behavior. And so it really can go to a dark place. And I would encourage people, if you don't already have those periods of free reign, to do it. It's okay to be scared, even just as an experiment, see what happens. And just like you, they may be surprised. Or even if you feel like they are eating too much, right? Sit with that fear, let them do their thing, and then use it as a chance to talk to them and reflect, enjoying the taste, how their bellies felt. They might give you information yeah, these were really good, and we don't get them that often, or something that actually cues you into a future experiment that really might help you. If your goal, which I think most parents' goal is overall, is kind of I just don't want to screw up my kids around food, but in the desire to not screw them up, we end up being too rigid. No, I think that's really awesome. Good job.
Thanks. I do think that kids, when you're talking about it and sitting with that feeling, I think sometimes my kids have overeaten on sweets. And I remember one time we went to a party and my younger son had a lot of juice. Mm-hmm. And we were walking back to the car and he said, oh, my stomach hurts. And I said, I wonder if you maybe drank too much juice. And I didn't say it in a super judgmental, I told you so way. Yeah. And he said, yeah, I think I did. And he looked at me. He said, why didn't you let me have all that juice? And I just had to laugh.
Blamer.
I know. But I think that and I've written about this before, that I think it's important to let kids have those experiences, because that's how we learn. And I think it's taken me, I'm in my 40s, and it's taken me a long time to really figure out what kinds of foods make my body feel the best.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about calories, and it's not about any of that. It's about what makes me feel good and gives me energy. And I think that kids can start learning those lessons too. And I already see it with my 12-year-old. And if he's had too much junk, he will kind of come back the other way and say like, oh my gosh, I need a piece of fruit. Like I need, like he senses it in his own body. And so I think that instead of us constantly lecturing and saying, here's what you need, and these foods aren't good for you. And I think like kind of like letting kids experiment and figure those things out is important.
Yeah. I mean, we learn and grow from our own mistakes. And so that we shouldn't try to keep that from kids. I mean, we shouldn't try to sabotage them, but like little experiments, I think can be a good thing. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I see mostly adults in counseling. I have a fair number of kids that I get through my, mostly through the pediatrician's office, which is a huge practice where my two girls go. And once they all got wind of what I did, my child population grew. And I love actually working kind of like with and sometimes I end up telling the parent, okay, you're actually my client for a little while. And then the child. But with the adults who are having concerns with weight and body and food now, literally I have this part of this questionnaire, and it is rare to find the adult where it didn't start for them in childhood. Some sort of, I mean, I've seen everything from my parents put me on a diet at 3, which I can't even imagine, to, my parent always kind of commented on my body, or if I was eating something, made a comment, and it kind of stuck with me. And it's our inner critics really are developed from our environment. We are not born, does this diaper make my butt look big? Or, we aren't born with any of that diet culture stuff. It's put in our brains. And if it doesn't go unchallenged, that it becomes our own voice. And so I think with your raising your kids philosophy, it's not to shield them from an inner critic at all, but just to really try to grow this caregiver voice and hope that that's what flourishes. I'm curious about your experience growing up, and I heard that you're a picky eater. So what would you like to tell me about that?
I was, and I was an extremely picky eater, and actually, they do have a term for that. They say extreme picky eater, and I do think I probably met that. Yeah, I was super picky. I lived on buttered noodles and Steakums. Do you remember Steakums? Yes. I lived on those. And my mom would make me like a separate meal almost every night because I wouldn't eat what everyone else was eating. And I'm that kid who would like go to a party and only eat a dinner roll, or, like it was crazy. And as I became an adult and kind of experienced, sort of positive peer pressure from seeing what my friends around me were eating, I got less picky. And then having kids made me realize, okay, I got to snap out of this. I have to try more foods if I want my kids to try these foods. So I think that as a result, there's still some foods that I have not been able to embrace. But I think I still have some sort of lingering texture issues. But I'm a whole lot better than I was now, or I was then. And I think it's given me a compassion as far as when my kids go through little finicky or picky stages. We don't have a rule in our house that you have to take a bite of everything. And if my kids are cautious about a food, I have a lot of patience with them. And I think that it's paying off. I think that, foods that my kids wouldn't even dream of touching, and maybe it takes like a year for them to get around to tasting it, but in most cases they do. And I think that it gives me a lot of compassion in terms of work, talking with other parents who have picky eaters too. So I'm not going to just say, well, do these 5 things and your child will eat the food, or just expose them to it 10 times and then they'll start eating it. I know that is not always the case, and it can take kids months and years to try certain foods. And so, as kind of strange as my eating habits were as a child, I do think it's sort of equipped me in a unique way with what I'm doing now.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a really interesting point, because I think a lot of people, and I've done this myself, but it's like we can kind of let our own thoughts and experiences influence what we do with our kids. So I distinctly remember this just happened recently. I was shooting videos for a client. And so one of the things, we had this beautiful bounty of, ginormous, Andy would call it like the pillow size version of kale and carrots and just all these beautiful fresh vegetables as part of the shot. And radishes were in there, still, with the leaves and everything. And so, I had this leftover food from the shoot, and I was trying to organize it to figure out how we were going to use it up in our menu and everything. And I looked at the radishes and I literally said, nobody's going to eat those. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I was like, wait a minute, how do I even know that? And because I don't eat them.
Right.
And it's funny because I was like, well, I just got curious about like why I didn't really eat them. And I was like, I don't know, I guess it just really the only answer I had was that I wasn't in the habit of it. So long story short, I cut them up. I added them to like this pre-prepped veggie tray that I do that just has any type of veggie that I hope my kids will eat raw, cut up, ready to go, just for easy lunch boxes or easy snacking. And lo and behold, both girls gobbled down the radishes.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Probably because it was just something different, but in our own minds, we can just make something up in our minds, say it, and that can get in the way from even trying, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I want to kind of get into a talk about fear mongering. I know this is a topic that you write a lot about, like fear mongering, especially when it comes to food. So tell me why do you care about that topic so much?
Oh, that's a good question. It just hits a nerve with me. I feel that and maybe it's, it's sort of part of the reason I started the blog, with wanting to show, pull back the curtain and show the honest truth. And I hate when there's so much pressure on, especially moms, just, to have everything right, to have everything together, to do everything perfectly. And then you have this outside pressure, this additional pressure of, but you have to eat these foods and not these. And if you're feeding your child, boxed cereal with its poison and 10 foods to never feed your kids, and this food is toxic, and my gosh, now we have to worry that choosing the wrong cereal for our kids is, going to mean that, we're poisoning them or we're giving them, toxic substances. And I feel like it's so irresponsible to be giving, especially parents, these messages. And so often, and as you know, as a dietitian, so often it's not even grounded in science. Mm-hmm. And, there are these broad statements that are made that are not true. And I just think it puts parents on edge. I get emails from moms who say, I am afraid to buy conventional fruit, and our store doesn't buy organic, so I don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, wow, it's just such a shame that in this quest to eat quote unquote healthy, that it's gotten to the point where people see certain, conventional fruit as dangerous instead of the healthy choice that it is. And I also think a lot of these issues, come down to economics. And I don't think healthy eating is something that should be reserved for people who have a certain budget. And a lot of this talk is pushing people into buying food that they cannot afford by saying you have to buy all organic, you have to buy all non-GMO, you only have to buy a local organic meat, or whatever it is, whatever these messages are. I think so often it's sending a message that you have to spend beyond your means. And a lot of my readers are on budgets. I'm on a budget. So I do talk a lot about, okay, maybe I will spend more for organic meat because that's important to me, but here are all the places I'm cutting back. And you have to do what works for you. If it's all organic, great. If it's non-organic, fine. So I just feel like, it's fear and it's misinformation, and food should not be about fear. I mean, it's just awful to imagine standing in the grocery store just afraid to buy conventional strawberries.
Yeah. Yeah, I have so many responses. But the one I have to bring up first, this literally just happened today. There is a mother who had her 3-year-old at the doctor, and she actually really likes her doctor. But the doctor had brought up that he has been trending. So he's not off of his trend on his growth chart. He has been trending this way since birth. I think it's somewhere between 85th and 90th percentile for weight. And the doctor basically said, I don't want him to lose weight, but I want him to gain weight less slow. And the doctor's saying, I don't want him to be on a diet. I mean, hello. Okay, first of all, 3, really? The AAP says never put a kid on a diet, never, ever, 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 ever. And this is like a doctor, somebody that you're supposed to trust. And, clearly the doctor's confused on what is or isn't a diet, because by saying I want him to go, he's on a trend, and he's not dipping below or above his curve. That's his natural curve. We move on the growth chart between 2 and 3. So this is like his first mark on the new growth chart. It's like, give the poor kid some time to see where he's going to settle out. Genetics is 70% of where you're going to end up anyway. And I'll cut to the chase. Context is everything, because this mother follows division of responsibility. And I even threw in some questions, but the doctor's advice, child gets fruit 3 times a day, whole fresh fruit. So not even, fruit juice or whatever, which all forms are fine. Obviously not too much juice because the fiber and blah, blah, blah. But this was, the A+ version, right? And the doctor's like, yeah, you might want to cut that back down to 1 a day. And I'm like, what? I cannot believe that a medical doctor is using a weight concern of a 3-year-old to say, cut back fruit. What about the fiber? What about the vitamins and minerals? What about the real nutrients of concern? And this is what is alarming to me. This is supposed to be the most trusted health person. And you get this kind of information. And thankfully, this mom was very self-confident and well-adjusted in what she was going to do. So this is supposed to be like our most trusted health provider. And they're, recommending to cutting out a source of nutrition, vitamins and minerals. It was just really disappointing to me to hear. And thankfully the mom is very well adjusted and confident in her feeding patterns. And, because I just basically said, like, it's that fruit is a source of nutrients. So that's not the thing to cut back on. And so anyway, I just think that, to your point about fear mongering, we can all look at it and say, that extreme stuff, that any little thing, if it's conventional, if it has a GMO in it, it's going to kill you. And, and this is not like, there'll always be somebody arguing for organic or for non-GMO, but what you and I are talking about is like that big picture when it comes to, overall health and well-being, where there is limitations around budgets and time and what's doable, that if you're going to have a lot of stress and anxiety about all these other things, that's probably going to be worse for your health than just finding something that works for you.
Yeah. Perfect is the enemy of the good. So I see that all the time.
Yeah. The other thing related to the big fear that I see now is around sugar. And I've brought this up before. I'm happy to see if the food labels are going to contain added sugar. We should have access to information. And we do have a guideline for added sugar, but like we talk about it in the sense of like, sugar's lurking in your yogurt, and, look, I've bought plain Greek yogurt and added fruit, that has a certain, taste, and it can be enjoyable and pleasurable. And then there are certain yogurts that are sweetened with vanilla or a certain flavor combination that's also enjoyable. And to say, oh, well, this yogurt that provides vitamins and minerals and probiotics and all that stuff is now ruined, we should not be picking on where sugar is used in a way to help good for you foods taste even better. But, the nutrition nerds in us, like when we actually go back and look at the N. Haynes data for the main source of added sugar, it's caloric soda. And so if your readers or Body Kindness listeners, unless you're a house that's overdoing it on caloric soda, your added sugar intake is probably not likely to exceed the recommended amount. I think the average added sugar intake is 13% of calories, and the recommended limit is 10. So as a country, we need to go down. But if probably the people that would see the biggest health benefit would be eliminating soda. And even on elimination, I read this interesting paper that was just like, you do have a budget for added sugar. So if that's your thing and you over brownies and this and that, then you can even find a way to make soda fit. But I think in the grand scheme of things, that sort of, if you make any amount of flexibility, it's going to hurt you. I don't think that's very helpful. And I don't think guilt around eating really helps people build a healthy relationship with food or their bodies.
Yeah. And I have heard of people, doing like our family's going to cut out all sugar, any sweetener at all. And I have cut out sugar a couple times just as sort of an experiment. You know what it's like as a dietitian. I kind of want to try things, that everyone's talking about and what is the experience like. And so I have done like a no sugar, no added sweeteners for a couple weeks just to see what it was like. And it was really, really hard. And I just wouldn't want to put my kids through that unless they wanted to do it. If my kids came to me and say, we want to try this. Okay, sure. Well, you can try it. But I do discourage people from demonizing sugar too much with their kids. I'm with you on the soda thing. We do not keep soda in the house, except we keep some ginger ale for like tummy bugs and stuff. And I do talk to my kids about soda because I think soda can be a really tricky territory. And it is, soda and sweetened drinks are the number one source of added sugar. And there really is nothing in soda that is helpful. And I think just the industry, I think we just really have to watch too. And there's so much marketing to kids and, teenagers and with sports stars and rock stars and, all of that. And so just sort of the principle of the matter, I really kind of do come down hard on soda. But we certainly, eat sugar in our house and I love to bake. And so I'm always like baking different desserts and I have such a sweet tooth, but we do try to talk about balance because I think you can certainly overdo it on sugary foods, but like with the yogurt. So we do, I keep a container of plain and a container of sweetened and I mix them. And so it's like sweet, but it's not, overly sweet. And my kids are just kind of used to that by now that, just a spoonful of plain and a spoonful of sweetened and we put it together. That being said, I still do buy little individual containers of sweetened yogurt that they sometimes take in their lunch and stuff. And I'm not worried about the sugar in those. So I think it's just all just sort of like a day-to-day, sort of balancing act and what, if a little bit of sugar, like you said, sugar can be used to sweeten already healthy foods. So I'm definitely not a sugar is the devil person.
Yeah. And I think that's the overall point is that we pursue health because we're interested in, some sort of benefit that we're going to get out of it, so that's where I always try to get people to kind of take it back to. Like, I remember being 9 and, wow, the human body is just amazing and your heart beats until it doesn't. And then you're dead and like, oh no, so like, I just became fascinated. That's how I got into science and the human body and eventually health. And it really is, I think for me, it's just a tightly held value. Like I care deeply about taking good care of my body. What that means to me is that, my genetics might set up for that I'm going to get a certain health concern, even despite my efforts in taking good care of myself. And I'm not going to live my life in fear. It's just going to be on my radar, right? So I'm going to go to the doctors and I'm going to take care of my body through exercise and sleep and through my sort of brand or my pattern of what healthy eating looks like to me. And it's definitely not driven by fear, but there's this rational idea of what I've known from experience, and that restriction definitely does not work and food rules does not work. So what I've learned is that, and you had mentioned this earlier, but just about the experimenting with how your body feels good most of the time. And it is through thinking about nutrition and balance and all that stuff. But I also make sure it tastes really good. So I have amazing tasting salad dressings, and I use butter and salt, and just enough. It's just enough for the taste and flavor, and with vegetables. And so when it's tasting really good, I'm super excited about it, and I know it's doing good things for my body and healthy. But for me, it no longer feels like a diet, and I just think that took some time just to kind of be completely free from that mindset that is about dieting and everything like that. So yeah, so I think what I would love to spend the rest of our time chatting about is a little bit about our own, how we're doing with our own well-being and body image. And, I know that you are an early reader of the book. I appreciate that. But so tell me a little bit about your own journey toward body kindness.
Well, I'm still working on it. My journey still continues. Yeah, I wrote a post about how my mom never talked about weight ever, and she still does not, which is kind of amazing to me that I grew up in a home with no weight talk at all. Like, no one ever talked about being on a diet. No one ever said, I feel fat, or do I look fat in this? Or there was no talk of calories. I mean, it's kind of amazing. But of course, even with that environment, I still had friends and went to school and heard the talk. And I remember the moment I even started thinking about my body, where a friend's mom made a comment about how I looked in a leotard. We were at a dance thing, and how different I looked than her daughter. I realized in that moment, like, my body is different than my friends. And I was probably like 11 maybe. Mm-hmm. And it was just this like, oh my gosh, she is tall and very, very skinny, and I am not. And I was never overweight, but I'm short, and I have short legs, and I sort of have sort of a gymnast body, even though I can't even turn a cartwheel. And I really wish I could. And so, I was never sort of that body ideal, right? And I always wanted to be tall and have long, skinny legs. And, there are all these things that I wanted. And no matter, of course, what I did, I was never going to have that body. And so I think just over time, sort of like accepting that and realizing that we are all different, and that is beautiful. And I think now, I honestly think we're seeing more body types. I just saw a commercial for bathing suits at Target. I don't know if you saw this commercial, Rebecca, but there were many different body types shown in the commercial. And it was so exciting to see bodies that were not your typical sort of swimsuit model body on a commercial. And I feel like we are moving towards more acceptance of all different body shapes and sizes. But, as I'm, getting into my 40s and sort of, I don't have time to obsess about my body anymore, or everything I'm eating. I'm so focused on other things. I think I really have come to terms with like, okay, this is the body I'm given, and it can do really amazing things. And yes, so I don't have, long, thin legs, but gosh, my legs are really strong, and I can do, really great things with them. And so it has definitely taken me a long time. And I would be lying if I said like, I am always happy with my body, but I definitely try every day. And I think being a mom and having kids and being a good role model, has positively influenced me, as far as I would never say in front of my kids, look at this fat, or I'm so fat, or I don't want to eat that. And I definitely know my husband wouldn't stand for me saying like, do I look fat in this? He can't stand any of that talk. And so I can't, there's no way I could go to him with that. So yeah, sorry, that was so long and rambling, but that's where I am.
Yeah. what I mean, I got to check out that Target commercial. That sounds good. And I would say as far as mainstream, I think that we're just at the beginning of this, but certainly representation of size diversity is very, very important. I don't know how much marketers are really just trying to be inclusive or they're realizing, hey, we have an untapped market, and I haven't seen for sure that this is true, but insert major eye roll. I heard that Jillian Michaels is going to be launching or has launched a plus size fitness line, which I would love to see clothing of all types and all qualities and all budgets for even the largest of bodies. Like it is, when I talk to clients and friends in a large body and how, they can't even walk into a store and pick out their size. They are relegated to buying online, a couple different sizes, see what works or doesn't work, send it back. And, we definitely have a privilege being able to walk into any store and trying stuff on that people in larger bodies don't. So there's a ton of work that needs to happen there, and so I think we're at the beginnings of it in mainstream, but you're absolutely right. Like we need the representation because especially when we're younger, we need to see what looks like us in a positive light. Otherwise, it is really easy to judge and criticize. And, I think that the whole, problem with a diet culture, right, which is the whole system that says you're not good enough unless you're trying to lose weight. That's the bottom line. That's, food is a moral issue, which we already addressed here. But in order to really tackle that idea of, what the best body looks like, we really do need to address the idea of fat phobia and the idea that you can tell a person's level of health by looking at them. And, it's not, there was a time in culture where fatness meant you were rich and, so people were trying to get large bodies and the bodies would fight that. And we've just been in a period probably since the 50s, 60s, and then some where it's like, different variations of thin. And I think there are a ton of factors that do influence the trends that we see in body sizes, but there have always been fat people on the planet. And whether or not industrialization or microbiome changes, food, you could label out all these things, but by and large, what diet culture says and even what we're taught as dietitians and what doctors do, this is your personal responsibility. Like your weight is a problem and your weight is your personal responsibility. And really what the science is showing is that diets lead to weight gain outside of your set point range, and just some really fascinating stuff about, that you're better off having never dieted at all. And it's just why I personally really care deeply about in my life and in any work that I do, and especially with other health professionals, it's this idea that if we could stop saying that weight is a problem at all and just approach from a place of neutrality, and that this is about, I'm here to help you with what are you interested in. And so even if they're like, gosh, I'm concerned about weight and I really do want to lose weight, if we can accept that weight is not something that we control, it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It's just that's not the goal, that the habits are the goal. Then, a person can improve their health even if their weight doesn't change. And that, when we're talking kids, is going to prevent body image issues and anxiety and eating disorders, things that are really important. I do hope that this is not a blip in our culture. I just saw the other day that the Journal of American Medical Association pulled some recent NHANES data that showed that there was a 7% decline in people who meet the overweight a category by BMI, a 7% decline in saying that they're actively trying to diet. And basically one side was like, oh my God, fat people are giving up dieting. What are we going to do? And this other side, this UCLA researcher was like, this is actually not bad news. Like, we're accepting ourselves more and we're enjoying life more, but and now we're in a better place to take better care of ourselves and work on our habits. And, I hope to see that this acceptance and inclusive mindset continue, because when you actually really dig even deeper, what I've learned in the past few years is that the oppression of a person's body is way worse for their health than anything that they might be doing. And this, oh, but I care about your health, type of pressure actually makes people less interested in making changes. And you mentioned before, there's economic things involved and, income levels that get in the way of what do they have access to for health and well-being. It really is a privilege to be in a place to be able to work on your health. And you really can be healthy at a very, very wide variety of sizes. Even if there was a point in your life where you had weight gain that might have been outside of what was genetically expected, you can still change your habits and work on your habits and just let your weight be.
I think that's important, as far as you said something about, the negative side of trying to lose weight. Thinking about, there are many of us who are like, gosh, my ideal, life would be so much better if I was 5 pounds or 10 pounds lighter. And when I think about, when I look at myself, and I've always been one of those, gosh, life would be so much better if I was 5 pounds, lighter. And then I think about what it would take to get me there. Mm-hmm. And I think about, the things that I would need to give up, or the time that I would need to take away from my family, or whatever it was. And I think I'm just not willing to do that. And so I think that's also a part of the journey, is just saying, you know what, I'm in my 40s. I have 2 kids. I really like my life, and I want to eat regular pasta. Like, I don't want to eat zucchini noodles instead of pasta. And I like, zucchini noodles are fine, but like, I want to eat regular pasta, and that's not something that I'm willing to give up. And I think, I would be sad if I had to give up that, or if I said goodbye to my family every night to go to the gym for a long time, or whatever it was that I had to do to whittle off those 5 little pounds, to go hungry more often than not. I'm just not willing to do those things.
Yeah. No. And I don't think it creates a better life. And it is something that, I think, can easily in today's world be taken to an extreme. We end up creating more suffering because we just won't let go of something we think makes us a better person. And my hope is that our culture can be less judgmental of people in larger bodies, because they have to walk around all day with, the average person. Some people, some of my clients have told me that people will say something to their face, even if they don't say something to their face, they get stares and eyeballs and just this assumption that maybe this person doesn't work out or eat right or take care of their bodies. And really there's nobody's obligated to do that. I know plenty of thin people who don't take care of themselves, but they just, our culture doesn't associate thinness with lack of self-care, but they associate larger bodies with lack of self-care. And it really is a mistake. And, I think that everybody should be free to pursue health in a way that is meaningful to them. But before we go, real quick, one last question. I saw a Facebook Live, and it was awesome. You were in your closet getting rid of jeans. So why don't you tell the listeners about that, and I'll include the link in the show notes.
Yeah, so I wrote about this pair of jeans that I had up in my closet. It was the most expensive jeans I've ever bought in my life. They were Citizens of Humanity. And I had the stomach flu for, like a week or whatever, and then proceeded to go out and buy the most expensive jeans I've ever bought, which was like the dumbest thing I could have done. And then not only did I buy these jeans, but then I had them tailored, because I'm so short, I have to tailor my jeans. And so then, of course, once I started eating normal food, I gained like, of course, it was probably those 5 pounds, those elusive 5 pounds. I gained those back, and the jeans didn't fit. So I got them back from the tailor, and I put them on. I was like, yeah, these don't fit. And of course, I couldn't return them. And so I folded them up, and I put them on the top shelf of my closet. And like every 6 months or so, I would get them down and try them on again, and they never fit. And I just was so angry, and all I wanted to do was fit into these jeans. And then I just decided that I needed to get rid of these jeans because they were like symbolizing something for me. It was that life would be better 5 pounds lighter idea. And really, since I turned 40, my body has been changing and weight is shifting around. And it's something that I've kind of had to come to terms with. And of course, I've had 2 kids. And so my belly doesn't look like it did in my 20s. And so I did this Facebook Live from my closet, and I was like, it's time to get rid of these jeans. And it's time to just accept who I am and buy jeans that fit and feel good in those jeans and, get on with my life and stop clinging to this idea. And it was funny because somebody actually contacted, and I said in my Facebook Live, I was like, I think I might, take them to the consignment store. Or, if any of you out there want this pair of jeans, like just holler, I'll send them to you. And I did have a listener or a viewer, one of my readers, I guess, contact me and say like, I'll take them. And so I sent them to her, and she loves them. And I said, I'll send them to you as long as you promise not to, like diet or anything to try to get into these jeans. And no, those were, that was her regular size. I sent them to her, and now she has them. And so I just feel like a lot of us cling to those things, that whatever it is at the top shelf of our closet that we think, oh, life would be so much better if I could fit into this. And, at some point it's just like, it's time to let that go and just accept who you are. And like I said, find pants that fit, because it's really awful walking around in pants that are too tight just because, you feel like, well, I'm a size whatever, and I'm not going to go up a size. And you know what? You need to feel good inside and out. And so get rid of those jeans.
Yes. Or anything else that doesn't fit.
Right.
I love that. Well, I really enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much. Where can folks go if they want to catch up with you and learn more about all your great stuff?
Well, my blog is realmomnutrition.com, and you can find me on Facebook at Real Mom Nutrition. I have a really active community there, and we have all kinds of great conversations over there. So those are the 2 best places to find me.
Great. Well, thank you so much for chatting today.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
The Body Kindness Classroom is coming. If you're ready for some radical collaboration, check out bodykindnessbook.com and check out Shop for more information. We're going to be having classes on body kindness calm and body kindness food. I'll see you in school.